from the grassroots, connecting people and sharing ideas.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Gowri.
And of course, we are in our second segment of today, which is the Blast from the Grassroots, where we have an author of A Kingdom in Crisis, Thailand's Struggle for Democracy in the 21st Century. We have Andrew MacGregor Marshall. Welcome to the morning. Welcome, and also thanks for Skyping with us. And today we are talking about the tragedy of King Bhumibol. Yeah, we are talking about the monarchy of Thailand here. But first of all, just a bit of introduction about yourself and the book.
Sure. I'm a journalist who's worked for Reuters for nearly 20 years in various war zones and dangerous parts of the world. And in the past few years, I've become very interested in Thailand because there's a law in Thailand that prevents journalists from telling the full truth about what's happening in the country. And I just became uncomfortable about this because as a journalist, I think it's our duty to tell the truth and explain what's happening. So 3 years ago, I resigned from Reuters because they were unwilling to write the full story of Thailand because of this law. And I've been working as an independent journalist. I can't go back to Thailand now because what I've written is considered illegal there.
So you're definitely on the same boat of like John Oliver, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I've been focusing on Thailand because I think it's important for people to know the full story if they want to understand what's happening. And that's why I wrote my book, which was just published a few weeks ago. And it's an attempt to show the hidden aspects of Thailand's crisis so that people both in Thailand and around the world can fully understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain more about that particular piece of law that prevents journalists or anyone to tell the whole truth about their news reporting?
It's called the List Majesty Law, and it was written to prevent people insulting or defaming the royal family. Because in Thailand, the royal family is a lot of people revere them. But this is a very old-fashioned law, and it's being used increasingly not just to stop people from insulting the monarchy, but it's been used increasingly over recent decades to stop people telling some fundamental truths about the monarchy. People get jailed for saying quite trivial things. And it's created a climate of fear among journalists and amongst Thais where nobody wants to discuss very important issues about Thai democracy because they're concerned that they might fall victim to this law. So it's caused a real chilling effect on freedom of speech in Thailand.
I see. So I'm just wondering, were there anyone that was being jailed for life just because they speak against the monarchy?
Yeah, there's been several very long sentences. There was an elderly grandfather who was jailed for 20 years, just a couple of years ago, for allegedly sending 4 SMS messages that were insulting to the monarchy. And he later died in prison. And there are several other people serving very long sentences at the moment. So lives are being ruined just because some people want to express their views or share truth about Thailand, and they can find themselves in jail for many years.
Mm-hmm. So what prompted you to write this book, and when you wrote it actually? Is it between certain periods?
Well, I wrote the book because I just thought it's important for people to understand the reasons for Thailand's political instability if the country wants to make progress. We say that a country that doesn't learn from its history can't move forward. And I think that's true in Thailand, where we've seen just a military coup in May, the latest of many military coups that the country has seen. And democracy is kind of going backwards. So I wanted to try and tell the full story because I think if people can talk about this openly and discuss the reasons for the crisis in Thailand, then hopefully that will help solve the crisis. So the book looks at a lot of Thai history. It discusses some events from hundreds of years ago, but it focuses on the current period and the last 10 years, because that's when we saw Thailand really slipping backwards and we saw Thai democracy facing severe problems. So I was trying to analyze what's happened and explain why.
And based on your research, because you looked at a lot of history as well to relate to what happened today, what do you think is probably the one important factor that that happened back then that influenced the Thai politics today?
Well, if you look at historic forces, historic factors, the role of the monarchy is obviously something that's, the monarchy plays a huge role in Thailand's history. And every time a king was coming towards the end of his reign, we often see quite a vicious succession struggle amongst different factions of the elite over who should be the next monarch. And Thailand was regularly destabilized at times of royal succession, and there was often conflict. So I think we're seeing a similar process again now. I think one of the important reasons for Thailand's crisis that nobody really talks about is that the current king, King Bhumibol, is very old, and there's a real disagreement over who should succeed him when he dies. So that's one of the unspoken reasons for the turmoil we've seen in Thailand.
King Bhumibol has this moral authority that probably his successors might not have. So how do you think the monarchy will go on forever, or will there be a point that people realize that maybe we should be a republic?
Well, even a few years ago, it would have been almost unthinkable for Thailand to become a republic, because at least up until 2006, King Bhumibol was very revered. But as you say, the monarchy will be facing a crisis, because when he dies, his successor, whoever it is, won't be able to match the same moral authority. And we've also seen in the past 8 years, with more freedom of information and so on, that a lot of Thais are beginning to question the monarchy. And, for the first time in Thai history, we've seen an underground mass movement emerging with people who have really lost faith in the monarchy. So it's a crisis of facing the monarchy. It's almost certain that their power will be reduced after the current king dies, and this informal influence that they have in politics will be reduced. But it's also worth remembering that one of the reasons for the Thai monarchy's influence is that they're immensely rich, and they control a fortune of probably about $40 billion or more, which makes the current king and his successor, they're the richest monarchs in Asia, in the world. So, the monarchy is embedded in Thai culture, and I think it's unlikely that we'd see a republic at this stage, but we might see a dramatic change in the influence of the monarchy. And this is one of the reasons for the current crisis, the fact the struggle is playing out between some Thais who want the democratically elected government to really be the most powerful entity, and others who prefer these older forms of power.
I don't know you realize or not, but Malaysia actually has 9 kings compared to
That's
Thailand
right.
has 1 only. But I'm just wondering, like the politicians in Thailand, are they vocal when it comes to the issue related to monarchy? I mean, vocal in support of the monarchy, or the majority of them, they are just neutral in terms of their stance?
Well, because Thailand, there's a personality cult has developed around the monarchy, so it's really unacceptable for any public figure to openly criticize or even be neutral on the monarchy. Everybody has to say publicly that they think the king is wonderful and they think the royal family is wonderful, whether or not that's what they really believe. So that's
the same
why
in Malaysia as well. So yeah, on the same boat on that.
Yeah, everybody's told that they have to praise the monarch, and powerful people compete with each other to be more royalist than each other. So we only get one-sided discourse in Thailand because there's this kind of personality cult that's emerged, and it's quite damaging for the country.
So now it is being controlled by a military regime. What is the future
Correct.
cause of this particular nation? Because it is, if I'm not mistaken, the second largest economy in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a very successful economy over recent decades, but it's now one of the slowest growing countries in ASEAN, partly because of all this political upheaval. And it's had 2 coups in the past decade, and over the past 80 years, it's had more than 20 successful or unsuccessful coups. So the military are regularly seizing power. And in my opinion, because one of the key reasons for the crisis is a battle over royal succession and who will follow the current king when he dies, I think Thailand's unlikely to see peace and stability until after the death of the current king. At that stage, we'll probably see more conflict as different factions compete over who they can put on the throne. But once the succession conflict is out of the way, we can hopefully see Thailand returning to more stability. But for the moment, I think while the current king remains alive, because of this battle over who will succeed him, we'll see instability continuing.
About the Thai monarchy, were there any concerns being shared among other ASEAN leaders? Because the issue about monarchy is one thing, but it is still being under the military regime, which is totally in support of the monarchy.
Yeah, I think privately there are concerns in ASEAN, but a lot of leaders in ASEAN are quite pragmatic, so they find a way to work with whoever they need to work with. But it's quite interesting that until recently Myanmar was the military dictatorship in ASEAN, and countries like Thailand were seen as progressive. And now the situation is reversed, where we see the Myanmar military gradually letting go, and we see politics in Myanmar opening up.
And we just reported that they are actually willing to have a peace talk with the opposition party in Myanmar.
Yeah, exactly. So we're seeing progress there, and Thailand is moving in the opposite direction, which is very worrying for ASEAN, and it's also worrying for the wider world. So we've seen a lot of countries, including the United States, Australia, the European Union, imposing sanctions on the military. And I think most countries are calling for a return to democracy as soon as possible. But whether or not that happens remains to be seen.
Do you think a change of a model towards a constitutional monarchy like the British would be a better choice for Thailand to reduce the power of the king? I mean, in essence.
In theory, Thailand is a constitutional monarchy where the monarch just has a purely symbolic role. But in practice, like a lot of countries in the region, Thailand is kind of ruled by an oligarchy of powerful families. And they give themselves legitimacy by linking themselves with the palace. And they're also very wealthy, partly through their links with the palace. So Thailand, the system should work, but Thailand's never really been a real constitutional democracy, even though it is on paper, because in practice we have these shadowy groups around the palace, linked to the palace, which are still exercising a huge amount of power, and they really dominate the country. And elected politicians have always been fairly weak in Thailand, until recently when Thaksin Shinawatra, who was the former prime minister who was deposed in a 2006 coup, he became very powerful, probably the most powerful elected politician in Thai history. And that kind of upset the political balance, and that was another reason for the crisis.
What are the other areas that you covered in your book that is worth highlighting?
Well, according to my explanation of Thailand's crisis, there's 2 main conflicts that are going on in Thailand that have become kind of entangled. And to understand what's happening in Thailand, you have to analyze the countries, these 2 conflicts. So the first conflict is just that many ordinary Thais have become much more politically aware in the past decade, and they want their political and economic rights, and they don't want the old system where they had to, an elite told them what to do, and they just accepted it. So we're seeing a push for democracy and better governance amongst ordinary Thais and poorer people. And they, for the first time in Thailand, they've learned the power of their vote, and they've learned that, in theory, democracy can make a positive difference for them. And then they've seen the governments they elect being overthrown repeatedly by the military and the courts. So we're seeing this broad development towards democracy and a struggle for democracy by Thailand's people. And that's a key part of what's happening in Thailand. The second conflict is the hidden conflict over who will become the next monarch when the current king dies. And it's often hard to understand what's going on in Thailand because the media never reports this succession conflict. But the most powerful factions in Thailand, they're all trying to position themselves ahead of succession. And one of the key reasons for the coup in May was that the military wants to be in control during the succession and manage the succession. So this is my analysis of Thailand, and that's what I try to explain in the book, how there's a wider conflict about democracy, and then there's a secret conflict about succession. And these two conflicts have become linked, and that's what causes this chronic instability that we've seen in Thailand in recent years.
Can you explain one of the chapters, which is the tragedy of King Bhumibol? You mentioned that he killed his brother, Ananda.
Yes, this is one of the darkest secrets of Thai history, and it's really a tragic story. In 1946, the current king's elder brother, who was king at the time, he was shot dead in his bedroom in the Grand Palace in Bangkok. And the killing was never properly solved. 3 men were executed for it back in the 1950s, but it was widely known that they were just scapegoats. But it's long been known by many people who with palace contacts in Thailand that there was a hidden story that hadn't been told. And it's something I've done a lot of research on in archives in the UK and the US. And what we find is a very sad story. The 2 brothers were very fond of playing with guns, and it appears that it was an accidental shooting, that the younger brother, who's the current king, he was playing with his brother in the bedroom and pulled the trigger not knowing that the gun was loaded, and he shot his brother through the head. And the same day he became the next king. So, he's never really got over what happened. Quite famously, he very rarely smiles in public. And he's from the WikiLeaks cables, which I've analysed, you can see that US diplomats and other senior sources believe the king suffers from depression, and he seems to have suffered from depression throughout his life. So his reign really began, long ago, back in 1946, at this time of tragedy where he's killed his brother by mistake. It must have been a very difficult time for him. But instead of telling the truth about what happened, the royal family and the elite, they covered it up. And so this explosive secret has been lurking, in Thailand beneath the surface for decades. And I think that's another reason why this List Majesty Law has never been removed, because there's a dark secret about how the reign began that the Thai elite don't want people to know.
Mm-hmm. And for the Thai people, where do they usually would get this undercurrent news about their king?
Well, most
is there
Thais
any like website or any like word of mouth or something?
Yeah, I mean, the official news in Thailand is all just propaganda, and every evening the royal news is broadcast that shows, the good works of the monarchy, and it's really just, as I say, propaganda. So most Thais have always, got information about the monarchy through gossip and through informal discussions with each other in private. And there's a huge amount of rumors and gossip about the Thai monarchy that Thais share with each other in private. But in the past decade or so, with the the growth of the internet and so on, it's now much more easy for Thais to share information online. People come to my website for what I've been writing, and there are several other websites that share taboo commentary about the monarchy.
What is your website, by the way?
It's called zenjournalist.com.
Mm-hmm.
So ZZEN journalist, all one word. So I've been covering Thailand there, and there's several other websites that do say, and also Facebook has become very important for Thais who want to share information. A lot of them use Facebook because it's a little bit safer, especially for people inside Thailand to discuss the monarchy and politics that way. So we're seeing a real change just in the way the internet has changed politics in many parts of the world. It's really changed the debate in Thailand, and the elite and the military are desperately trying to censor this and block various websites. But I think it's impossible for them now, because in the 21st century, you can't suppress information the way that you could in previous centuries. So the Thai elite and Thai monarchy really have to start dealing with reality and not try to censor it.
Thailand has one of the highest inequality in Southeast Asia. Has this been one of the factors that the power of the king has been strengthened instead of getting lesser?
Yeah, you're quite right. Inequality is a severe issue in Thailand, and it shows the domination of this small elite over the rest of the country. The power of a king is actually quite paradoxical because, in fact, he doesn't really have much power. And one of the arguments I make in my book is that the king is usually more of a puppet of the elite rather than a leader of the elite.
So it's the other way around instead.
Yeah, the king is a symbolic figurehead, and the king is used by a group of elite to dominate the country and to monopolize the political and economic power in the country. So this is why we've seen such severe inequality. Thailand is a very hierarchical society, and with the king notionally on the top, but in fact, I argue that it's not the king himself who's the powerful actor. It's this elite who are linked to the palace and allied with the palace, and they use the monarchy in order to legitimize their power.
Mm-hmm. So what's the future direction of the younger generation? Probably in the next 10 to 20 years, what would it be?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, many younger Thais are questioning the personality cult about the monarchy, and many of them are asking questions. So you could see a shift in attitudes towards the monarchy. Thailand also has a very poor education system, which, in my view, is linked to the same problem. Because the elite want to keep people relatively pliant and uninformed about what's happening. They don't want to have an education system that encourages people to think for themselves. And so this is causing increasing problems for Thailand. And I think a lot of young people really want some positive change. So we'd hope that, especially as the country evolves, education will improve and, younger people will be able to have more democracy.
Mm-hmm. So thank you, Andrew MacGregor Marshall. Where can people get your book, by the way, those who are outside of the UK?
Sure. You can find it on Amazon. It's called A Kingdom in Crisis, and it should also be in bookstores around the region this week. So big bookstores or on Amazon is the best place to look for it.
People from Malaysia like myself, I can get access of the hard copy in the major bookstores?
It should be arriving in major bookstores this week.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Thank you.